the first thing Nia Carter ever said to Victor Hale was not, "Hello," not "Please," not even "Mister, can you help me?" It was, "You got any food you were going to throw away? Because if you do, I might be able to trade you for a miracle." Victor laughed at her, and honestly, if you had seen him that night, sitting alone in a 20-room house with half a bottle of scotch warming his hand and a wheelchair parked beneath him like a sentence he could not appeal, you probably would have laughed too. But 3 months later, in a courthouse packed with reporters, people who had spent their lives treating Victor Hale like a broken old man would watch him stand on his own 2 feet, and the little girl everyone had underestimated would be standing 10 feet away with a wilted yellow flower tucked behind her ear. Back then, though, none of that had happened yet. Back then, Victor Hale was 53 years old, rich enough to have strangers call him Sir, even when they hated him, lonely enough to notice every clock in his house ticking at once, and angry enough to believe that was just the way life worked when it was done taking things from you. His house sat at the top of a long curved road in a place called Larkspur, Connecticut, one of those towns where old money hid behind stone gates and people smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Cedar House had belonged to the Hale family for almost 80 years. It had a library no one read in, a dining room big enough for 16 people who never came, and a kitchen with more polished marble than any kitchen had a right to have, especially considering that Victor usually ate toast over the sink or whatever Marlene, his house manager, left covered in the warmer. The place was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful, expensive, quiet, and somehow a little sad if you stay too long. Victor had not always lived like that. Before the accident, he was the kind of man people leaned toward when he spoke. He ran Hale Meridian, a shipping and construction company his father built from one trucking depot and a stubborn refusal to quit. He flew to Chicago on Mondays, shook hands in Atlanta on Thursdays, and came home on Fridays with a suit that smelled like airports and hotel soap. He married Elaine when they were both young enough to think being successful meant being happy. And for a while, maybe it did. They had dinners with clients, weekends on the coast, pictures in magazines nobody kept, and the kind of friends who always said things like, "We should do this more often," right before never calling again. Then one rainy night outside Hartford, a delivery truck slid across an icy exit ramp. Victor swerved, the car rolled twice, and when he woke up 3 days later, the doctors told him his spinal cord injury was permanent. They used words like limited recovery, quality of life, long-term management. All those polite medical phrases that sound almost gentle until you realize they are handing you a future you never asked for. At first, Victor fought everything. He fought the nurses, the physical therapists, the insurance company, his own body, and sometimes Elaine, even though she had done nothing except stand too close when he was hurting. He spent years chasing specialists. Germany, Boston, Arizona, wherever somebody had a machine, a trial program, or a brochure that used the word breakthrough, Victor went. He spent more money trying to walk again than most people would make in 3 lifetimes, and each time he came home with the same empty legs and a little less faith in everyone around him. Elaine stayed for 5 years after the accident, which was longer than Victor gave her credit for at the time. The truth was, he made it hard. Pain made him cruel in small ways at first. He snapped when she helped him button a shirt. He stopped speaking during dinner. He accused her of pitying him whenever she tried to make plans. Then one night, after he threw a glass against the wall because she suggested hiring a counselor, Elaine stood in the kitchen shaking so hard she had to grip the counter. She did not scream. That was the part Victor remembered later. She just looked at him and said, "I know you are hurting, Vic, but you have started treating everybody who loves you like they caused the accident, and I cannot keep drowning with you." She left 2 weeks later. Victor told people she had abandoned him. It took him nearly a decade to admit that was not exactly true. After Elaine, his business partners slowly moved him out of the company. They called it protecting his legacy, which was business language for moving a man aside before he became inconvenient. His mother, June, visited less often because every visit ended with Victor saying something sharp enough to make her cry in the car. His old friends stopped inviting him to dinners because he either said no or showed up and made everyone uncomfortable by looking miserable in a room full of people trying very hard to pretend they were not afraid of becoming him. Eventually, Victor stopped blaming them, not because he forgave them, but because he did not have the energy. He had become the sort of man who could look out over a snow-covered lawn and think, "This is what I deserve, a beautiful view and no one to share it with." That December, A storm came through Larkspur hard enough to shut schools down for 2 days. The roads turned silver under the streetlights, the power flickered twice, and by 10 o'clock, the whole town seemed to disappear under a blanket of snow. Marlene had left early before the weather got bad, which she did not like doing, but Victor had told her to go. He told himself he wanted the quiet. That was one of his favorite lies. He sat near the library window, staring down the hill toward the apartment blocks on the other side of the road, buildings he had passed for years without really seeing. They were old brick structures with broken gutters and narrow balconies, the kind of place people in Larkspur pretended did not exist because it made the town brochure look less impressive. Victor had no idea who lived there. He had never asked. He had spent so much time feeling sorry for himself that he had not noticed there were people 10 minutes away living through troubles. Money could not simply soften. Around 11:30 he heard a knock on the side door. It was so faint at first that he thought it might be a branch tapping the glass. Then it came again, 3 little taps, then a pause, then 2 more. Victor looked toward the hallway. No one was supposed to be there. He almost ignored it. He had become very good at ignoring things that might require him to care. But the knocking came again, softer this time, and something about it bothered him. It did not sound impatient. It sounded tired. So he pushed himself down the hallway, wheels whispering over old hardwood, and opened the side door. A little girl stood on the porch, maybe 7 years old, maybe smaller than 7 looked, because she was trying to disappear inside a coat that had once belonged to someone much bigger. Snow clung to her braids. Her shoes were canvas sneakers with one strip of grey duct tape around the left toe. She held both hands in front of her chest, not begging exactly, more like she was trying to keep them warm. Victor stared at her for a second, then said, "You lost, kid?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I live down there." She pointed toward the apartment blocks. Then she looked at him, looked at the wheelchair, looked back at his face and said, "You got any food you were going to throw away?" Victor blinked. "What? Food? Like leftovers?" "My mama is working late, and Miss Delia downstairs said big houses always got food nobody eats. She told me not to come up here, but she also said hungry makes people do brave things." Victor had heard grown men make speeches with less nerve than that little girl had in one sentence. He looked past her toward the road, expecting to see an adult waiting in a car or hiding by the gate, but there was nobody. Just snow, a dead, quiet street, and the yellow glow from the lamp over the porch. "Where is your mother?" he asked. "At work. Both jobs tonight. She works at the diner until 11 and then cleans offices at a clinic, but she said she might get held up because the buses are bad." Victor felt something twist in his chest, something he did not like because it felt too close to guilt. "You walked here alone in this weather for leftovers?" The girl shrugged. "I know the way, and I'm not asking for money. Money makes people start asking questions. Food is easier." There was a pause, and Victor should have been offended by that, should have rolled his eyes and told her to go home, but instead he heard himself say, "What is your name, Nia?" "Nia Carter. Victor Hale." Yeah, no, Nia said it like she was telling him he had spinach in his teeth. Everybody knows. "You are the man in the sad house." Victor stared at her. "The man in the sad house." Victor stared at her. "The man in the what?" "The sad house. It is real quiet up here. Even the lights look lonely." For a second, Victor almost got angry, and something strange happened. He laughed, not a polite little breath through the nose, not the kind of laugh people make because they do not know what else to do. He actually laughed. It surprised him enough that he put one hand over his mouth. Nia smiled like she had been waiting for that exact reaction. "There you go," she said. "Your house is less sad already." Victor shook his head. "You are something else. I get that a lot." He opened the door wider. "Come in before you freeze to death." Nia stepped inside carefully, not with wide, hungry eyes like Victor expected, but with the cautious look of a kid entering someplace she had been told did not belong to her. She looked around at the polished floor, the dark paintings, the enormous staircase, then whispered, "This place got more rooms than my whole building." "Probably," Victor said. The kitchen lights were still on. He rolled ahead of her and pulled open the refrigerator. There was roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, a pie Marlene had made because she still believed food could fix moods, which was both annoying and, unfortunately, often true. Victor set a plate on the counter, then paused. "You can eat here," Nia nodded, but she did not grab at the food. She stood on tiptoe to look at the plate and said, "Is this all yours?" "Mostly." "Then why did you not eat it?" Victor looked down at the meal. "I was not hungry." Nia considered that like it was a math problem. Then she said, "You should probably eat when you can. Sometimes hungry comes back mean." That one landed harder than she knew. Victor sat quietly while she ate. She did not shovel food into her mouth or make a mess. She ate slowly, saving half the chicken in a napkin. Victor asked, "You saving that for your mother?" She nodded. She will say she is not hungry, but she always says that when there is not enough. Victor looked away before she could see what was happening to his face. He had spent 20 years believing the worst thing in life was losing the use of his legs. That night, watching a little girl wrap half a chicken leg in a napkin for her mother, he understood that suffering was not a competition, and maybe he had been losing at being human for a very long time. When Nia finished, she wiped her hands with a paper towel and looked at him again. "Mr. Victor, yeah? I can help you walk again." The words were so sudden that Victor thought he had heard her wrong. "What did you say?" "I can help you walk." She said it with complete seriousness, like she was telling him she knew how to fix a flat tire. Victor leaned back in his chair. "Nia, I've had doctors from 3 countries tell me I will never walk again. They used big machines and words I cannot pronounce. You are 7 years old and wearing tape on your shoe." She looked down at the shoe, then back up at him. "I know, but you gave me food when you did not have to. So I can give you something too. What exactly are you giving me?" "Hoop," she said, "and maybe exercises. My mama says people give up before their bodies do." Victor almost laughed again, but there was something in her face that stopped him. She was not mocking him. She was not pitying him. She was not mocking him. She was not pitying him. She did not care that he was rich, and she did not care that he had been important once. To Nia Carter, he was just a sad man in a wheelchair who had food in his kitchen. That was all. Victor looked down at his useless legs, then back at her. "You really think you can make me walk?" Nia took a small flower from her coat pocket. It was a little crushed, a yellow weed maybe, with one bent petal and a stem wrapped in a torn piece of grocery receipt. "I think you have to want to try," she said. Then she held it out to him. "This is for your table, so it does not look so lonely." Victor took the flower. It was the most ridiculous gift he had received in years, and it was also the only one he could remember wanting to keep. He drove Nia home himself, or as much as a man in a wheelchair could drive someone home. He called a local ride service he trusted, waited with her in the foyer, and made the driver promise to walk her to the apartment entrance. Nia did not want him to call anyone. She said her mother would get mad. Victor told her, "That is what mothers are for." She looked at him and said, "Are you sure you know about mothers?" Victor had no answer to that. The next morning, Marlene arrived before sunrise carrying coffee, a grocery bag, and the permanent expression of a woman who had spent 30 years cleaning up after rich people and had no patience left for their emotional surprises. She found Victor in the kitchen, staring at the little yellow flower in a water glass. "Is that supposed to be decoration?" she asked. Victor looked up. "A friend gave it to me." Marlene glanced at him. "You have friends now. I was wondering when you would start making jokes at my expense again." "I never stopped, Mr. Hale. You just stopped listening." He told her about Nia, not every detail, but enough. Marlene listened with her arms folded, getting quieter as he talked. When he finished, she set the grocery bag down hard on the counter. "You let a child from East Ridge walk into this house alone at night? I fed her. That is not what I asked. Her mother works 2 jobs. That is unfortunate," Marlene said, "but it does not mean you bring strangers into your home." Victor felt his jaw tighten. "She is 7. Children can be used. You know that. People know who you are. They know what this house is worth. And that neighborhood, Victor, it is full of people looking for a way out." Victor stared at her. "Marlene, I have known you since I was 12. Do you hear yourself? I hear myself just fine. I am trying to protect you. From a hungry 7-year-old? From people who see weakness and turn it into an opportunity." Victor looked at the flower. Then he said quietly, "Maybe I am tired of living like everyone who needs something from me is trying to steal it." Marlene softened for half a second, then hardened again. "You are not thinking clearly." "No," Victor said. "Maybe I am thinking clearly for the first time in years." Nia came back the following afternoon. She knocked on the front door this time, which Victor found funny because she had already crossed the line between stranger and something else. She was carrying another flower, this one wrapped in a page torn from an old coloring book. Marlene opened the door before Victor could reach it. Nia looked up at her and said, "Hi. Is Mr. Victor in?" Marlene stared at her. "Is Mr. Victor in?" Marlene stared at her. "Your mother knows you are here." Nia shifted her weight. "She knows I am outside. That is not what I asked." Nia looked past her into the hallway. "Mr. Victor?" Victor rolled forward from the sitting room. "She is fine, Marlene. Let her in." Marlene stepped aside, but not before giving Nia a look cold enough to freeze the storm outside. Nia noticed. Kids always notice. She just did not say anything until Marlene left the room. Then she whispered, "Your lady is grumpy." Victor almost smiled. "That is one word for it. Is she mad at me?" "No. She is scared. People act mean when they are scared. Mia is scared. People act mean when they are scared." Nia thought about that. Then she said, "That is silly. If you are scared, you should get nicer so people help you." Victor looked at her. "You know, you might be the smartest person in this house." "I know," Nia said, and for the first time he heard a little mischief in her voice. That afternoon, Nia sat on the floor beside his chair and explained her plan. It was not really a plan, not one a doctor would recognize. She said they were going to start with his feet, because feet were stubborn and needed encouragement. She told him to close his eyes and remember walking somewhere he loved. Victor said, "I do not think that is how nerves work." Nia patted his knee. "Maybe not, but it is how people work." So he humored her. He closed his eyes. At first he saw nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he remembered a fishing trip with his father when he was 9 years old. He remembered wet grass under his boots, a thermos of bad coffee, his father complaining that fish had no respect for schedules. He remembered standing on the riverbank without thinking about standing at all. His throat tightened. Nia placed her little palm over his knee. Her hand was warm. "I am sending the good stuff down there," she said. "What good stuff?" "Love." Victor opened one eye. "That is not a medical term. Maybe doctors need better words." And then for the first time in 18 years he felt something, not movement, not quite pain. It was more like the faintest electric flutter behind his left knee. Gone before he could be sure it had been there. Victor went still. Nia watched his face. "You felt it, did not you?" "Probably a muscle spasm. That is still something. It could be nothing." "Then we will try again tomorrow." She said it so simply that Victor did not know how to argue. Across town, in a second-floor apartment with a broken radiator that clicked all night, Tasha Carter came home just after midnight and found half a chicken leg wrapped in a napkin on the kitchen counter. Tasha was 34, worked more hours than she could count, and had learned the hard way that exhaustion did not make life pause out of courtesy. She had been a nursing assistant before her father got sick, then a home health aide after that, then whatever else paid enough to keep heat on and rent mostly covered. She loved her daughter with the fierce, protective love of someone who had spent years hearing promises from people who never had to live with the consequences of breaking them. When Nia told her where the food came from, Tasha did not smile. She sat down slowly at the kitchen table and said, "You went where?" "The big house on the hill. The man with the wheelchair gave me leftovers. Nia, I told you never to go inside somebody's house without me. But I was hungry. I know, baby, I know." Her voice cracked on the last word, and that made Nia look afraid. Tasha pulled her close. "I am not mad because you were hungry. I am mad because the world is not always safe for little girls who have to be brave." Nia looked up at her. "He was nice. Nice is not the same thing as safe. He listened to me." Tasha closed her eyes. That was the problem. She wanted to believe people could be kind without wanting something back. But she had been a black woman in Larkspur long enough to know that rich people could hide selfishness behind charity, and neighbors could call it generosity, as long as it looked good from the right angle. The next morning, after dropping Nia at school, Tasha put on her best coat, the one with the missing button hidden under the lapel, and walked up the hill to see the house. She did not call ahead. She did not give herself time to get nervous. By the time Victor opened the front door, she was standing straight, both hands tight around the strap of her purse, fury and fear doing their best to keep each other warm. "You, Victor Hale?" she asked. "Yes, I am Tasha Carter, Nia's mother." Victor had expected anger. He had not expected how tired she looked. There were dark circles under her eyes, a small tear in one glove, and a kind of steel in her voice that told him she had been forced to fight battles people like him never even saw. "I need to know what happened in this house last night," she said. Victor nodded once. "Come in. I am not here for coffee. I did not offer coffee." That almost made her smile, but not quite. She stayed near the doorway while Victor told her everything. He told her Naya had come hungry, that he fed her, that he called a car to take her home, that there were cameras in the kitchen and hallway if she wanted to see the footage. He did not mention the flower at first, but Tasha noticed it sitting in the water glass. When he got to the part about Naya saying she could help him walk again, Tasha's eyes narrowed. "My daughter said that?" "She believes in people," Victor said. "That does not give anyone the right to use her need to believe. I am not using her. You do not get to decide that alone." The room went quiet. Victor could have pulled rank. He could have gotten offended. Old Victor would have. Old Victor would have said something about his reputation, his intentions, his property, all the things men say when they want a woman to feel small for questioning them. But he looked at Tasha and saw a mother who had probably been dismissed by wealthier people her whole life. So he said, "You are right." Her shoulders dropped a fraction, just enough for him to know she had not expected that answer. Victor continued, "You do not know me, and you should not trust me because I gave your daughter a plate of food. You should trust what you can see. Watch the camera footage. Ask the driver who brought her home. Check every room in this house if you want to. But Nia will not be here without you knowing, and she will not be alone with me again unless you decide it is safe." Tasha studied him for a long moment. The fireplace snapped behind them. Outside, snow slid off the roof in a soft, heavy rush. Finally, she said, "You sound like a man who has practiced saying the right thing." Victor looked at the floor. "I used to be a man who said the wrong thing so often I got very good at noticing it afterward." That one landed. Tasha glanced toward the flower again. Then she said, "I will come back this afternoon with Naya. I want to see the house, meet the people who work here, and make sure she understands the rules." "That is fair. And one more thing," Tasha said. "If my daughter ever feels uncomfortable here, if she ever says you made her feel small, scared, confused, or like she owes you something, she will never come back. Understood? And Mr. Hale, Victor, do not mistake my being polite for me being easy to fool." Victor nodded. "I would not dare." Tasha turned to leave, but before she reached the door, a black sedan slowed at the curb outside the gate. The window rolled down, and Celia Wainwright, who had lived 2 houses over for 30 years and believed the entire street belonged to her opinion, leaned toward the open window, wearing a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Well," she called out, loud enough for Tasha to hear, "it looks like Cedar House has finally started taking walk-in guests." Tasha stopped. Victor felt something old and ugly rise in his chest, the kind of anger he used to turn inward because it was easier than standing up to anyone else. Celia looked from Tasha to him and added, "Be careful, Victor. People see a lonely man with money, and suddenly everyone has a reason to knock." Tasha did not move. She did not look embarrassed. She looked tired in a way that made Victor ashamed of every time he had let people like Celia say whatever they wanted because he did not want conflict. Then Tasha turned back toward him and said, "You know what, Mr. Hale? Maybe your house is not the sad part. Maybe it is the people standing outside it." And Victor knew right then that the little girl with the taped-up shoe had not brought a miracle to his door. She had brought a mirror, and he was finally seeing the kind of man he had been, the kind of town he had helped build, and the fight that was about to come straight through his front gate. The fight did not come all at once, not with a dramatic speech or a slammed door or somebody standing in the street holding a sign. It came the way most ugly things come in a town like Larkspur, quietly at first, dressed up as concern. By that evening, Celia Wainwright had called 3 people. Those 3 people had called 6 more, and by morning there were rumors moving through the country club, the grocery store, the church parking lot, and the little coffee shop downtown that Victor Hale had let a strange woman and her daughter into Cedar House because he was lonely, confused, and too proud to admit he needed supervision. Nobody said Tasha Carter's name with respect. They said it the way people say the word problem when they do not want to admit they are talking about a human being. Marlene heard the whispers before Victor did, because Marlene heard everything. She had a cousin at the pharmacy, a friend at the dry cleaner, and a deep personal relationship with every cashier within 10 miles. By noon, she came into Victor's office holding her phone like it had personally insulted her. "You need to see this," she said. Victor looked up from a stack of paperwork he had not actually been reading. "Is this about the plumbing again?" I wish it was the plumbing. She set the phone in front of him. On the neighborhood social page, somebody had posted a photo taken from across the street. It showed Tasha leaving Cedar House the day before, shoulders squared, coat buttoned tight, Victor's wheelchair barely visible behind the glass door. The caption said, "Does anyone know if Mr. Hale's family is aware that strangers from East Ridge are coming and going from his property? He is vulnerable and may need protection." Underneath were comments, dozens of them, some pretending to be worried, some too cowardly to say what they meant, and a few saying exactly what they meant. One woman wrote, "A lonely rich man is an easy target." Another said, "This is why estates need proper staff and boundaries." Then there was one from Celia herself, polished and poisonous. "We should all be compassionate, but compassion should not require someone to ignore common sense." Victor read it twice. Then he handed the phone back without saying anything. Marlene watched him carefully. "You know she is talking about the girl and her mother." "I know. You should call your attorney." "Why?" "Because people are already looking at this like they have a right to decide who comes into your house." Victor wheeled himself toward the window. Across the road, the East Ridge apartment sat under a thin layer of snow, their balconies crowded with old chairs, laundry lines, and satellite dishes. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Tasha was probably trying to get Nia fed, dressed, and to school before going to work another shift. Somewhere inside, Victor felt a sharp, unwelcome awareness settle into place. He had lived in Larkspur his entire adult life, had funded parks, donated to schools, shaken hands at charity dinners, and still, he had never really looked across the road until a hungry child knocked on his door. That bothered him more than Celia's post. Maybe the whole town had been wrong for a long time, he said. Marlene blinked. "About what? About who belongs where?" Marlene folded her arms. "Victor, do not turn this into some kind of moral mission because you feel guilty about one little girl. I am not. I am just tired. Tired of what? Tired of hearing people call cruelty common sense." Marlene's expression changed, just a little. She had known him long enough to recognize when he had made up his mind about something, and Victor Hale had always been dangerous when he made up his mind. Not loud dangerous, not reckless dangerous, but the kind of man who became very still, then moved one piece at a time until the entire board looked different. That afternoon, Tasha came back with Nia just as she said she would. They arrived near 4, while the light outside was turning that dull blue color winter afternoons have when the day gives up early. Nia wore a purple knit hat with one palm hanging sideways and carried a paper bag close to her chest. Tasha looked tired but alert, like she had not slept much and did not trust anyone who said they had good intentions. Victor met them in the foyer. He had cleaned up more than usual. Not because he was trying to impress Tasha, he told himself, but because he had suddenly become embarrassed by how much dust a sad man could accumulate when he stopped caring. Nia looked around and said, "You got more lights on today?" Victor glanced toward the lamps. "I do. It feels less sad." "Maybe," he said. Tasha noticed the tension right away. She looked at him, then at Marlene standing near the hall with her lips pressed into a line. "Something happen?" Victor did not sugarcoat it. "People are talking." Tasha let out a tired breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "People always talk. Not like this. They're posting pictures, suggesting you are taking advantage of me." Tasha's face went still. For a second, Victor thought she might turn around and leave. Instead, she looked at Nia, then at the polished floor beneath their feet. "So this is what I was trying to avoid," she said quietly. "I know." "No, you do not, Victor." She looked up at him now, and there was no fear in her face, only anger that had been waiting years for a place to go. "You know what happens when people like Celia decide somebody like me's a threat? They do not just gossip. They call employers, they call landlords, they call schools. They make sure every door you need gets a little harder to open. Then they sit back and say they are only protecting the community." Victor felt every word. He wanted to defend himself, but he could not fully. He had been part of that community. He had benefited from it. He had been the kind of man people protected without asking whether he deserved it. "I am sorry," he said. Tasha stared at him. "Do not apologize to me like that fixes it. I'm not trying to fix it with an apology." "Then what are you trying to do?" Victor looked at Nia, who had been listening quietly, her little face more serious than a child's face should have to be. "I am trying to not make it worse." Tasha softened just enough to hear him. Nia tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, can I show Mr. Victor my flower?" Tasha looked down at the paper bag. What flower? Nia pulled out a small plastic cup with dirt in it. Inside was a crooked green stem with 2 tiny leaves. I planted a seed in Miss Delia's window box, she said. It is not much yet, but it is trying. Victor smiled despite himself. That is a very respectable plant. It is a sunflower. It is going to be tall. How tall? Taller than you, maybe. Nia held the cup up at eye level. Then it can look into the sad house windows. Tasha covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Victor shook his head. You really have a thing about my house, do not you? It is getting better, Nia said, but it still needs help. Victor invited them into the living room, and this time Tasha did not stay by the door. She sat at the edge of the sofa, hands folded over her purse, watching everything. Victor showed her the cameras in the hall, the kitchen, the front entrance, even the security room where Marlene kept the monitors. He did not do it because he wanted to prove he was innocent, though he did. He did it because Tasha deserved to know exactly what kind of place her daughter was entering. Nia drifted toward the fireplace and began asking questions about every object she saw. What is that? A compass. Does it work? Probably. What is that? A letter opener. Why do rich people need a knife for letters? Victor looked at Tasha. She asks good questions. Tasha smiled despite herself. She asks every question. That is different. At one point, Nia stopped beside the grand piano in the corner. It had not been played in years. She touched one key very softly, and a single low note rolled through the room. Victor flinched. Tasha noticed. Did somebody play? She asked. My father. He played badly, Victor said, but loudly. He thought that made up for it. Tasha looked at the piano, then at him. Did you play? Not well. Nia pushed another key. It sounded brighter this time. This one is happier, she said. Victor watched her. You can tell. Yeah. Sad sounds go down, happy sounds go up. That is not exactly how music works. It is how it feels. Again, Victor had no answer. After a while, Tasha stood. We should go, Nia protested immediately. But Mama, I have not done the leg thing yet. The what? Tasha looked at Victor. He looked suddenly uncomfortable. Nia thinks she can help me with my physical therapy. Tasha's eyebrows rose. Is that what she thinks? Victor gave a small smile. Apparently, yes. Tasha turned to Nia. Baby, Mr. Hale has doctors for that. I know, Nia said, but doctors can be smart and still not know everything. Victor watched Tasha try not to smile. She looked down at her daughter, then at him. 5 minutes, she said. 5 minutes, Victor agreed. Nia sat in front of his wheelchair and placed both hands on his left knee. Her face became serious in that way. Children get serious when they are pretending to be doctors, teachers, or grown-ups. Close your eyes, she told him. I have done this before. You did it once. That is before. Now do it better. Victor closed his eyes. What am I supposed to think about? Somewhere you used to walk. Somewhere you liked. Victor almost said he did not know, but then he thought of a dock in Maine years ago before the accident, before Elaine left, before he learned how easy it was to become the worst version of yourself. He saw himself walking toward the water with bare feet, complaining because the boards were hot, holding 2 cups of coffee while Elaine laughed at him from the end of the dock. He had not thought about that morning in years. In the memory, his legs were strong. He did not have to ask them to move. They just did. Nia's hands pressed lightly over his knee. Tell them you remember, she whispered. Victor swallowed. I remember, he said. Try to move your toe. I cannot. Try anyway. He focused. Nothing happened at first. Then he felt it again. That faint flutter, a flicker so small he almost convinced himself it was his imagination. His left foot twitched. Not much, not enough for anyone else to notice, but Victor saw it. He opened his eyes. Nia was smiling like she had been expecting it all along. Tasha saw his face change. What happened? Victor looked at his foot. I think I felt something. Tasha stared at him. Something what? I do not know. A muscle spasm, maybe. Nia shook her head. It was your foot saying hi. Victor laughed, but this time his eyes burned. Tasha looked between them, unsure whether to be hopeful or afraid. She had seen too many things in life go wrong right after people let themselves believe they could go right. So she did what mothers do when they want to protect their child from disappointment, and maybe themselves too. She said, we should not get carried away. Victor nodded. We will not. But when Tasha and Nia left that evening, Victor did something he had not done in years. He called his neurologist. Dr. Ann Mercer had been treating him on and off for nearly 2 decades. She was blunt, brilliant, and had long ago stopped telling him what he wanted to hear, just because he was paying the bill. When she answered, Victor said, "I need an appointment." Anne was silent for a moment. "Are you in pain?" "No." "Then what is it?" "I think my foot moved." Another pause. "Victor, muscle spasms are common." "I know, but this felt different. You have said that before." "I know." He closed his eyes. "Please." Anne's voice softened. "Come in, Monday morning. And Victor, do not build your whole life around one twitch." Victor looked at the little yellow flower still sitting in its glass on the table. Too late, he thought. The next few weeks changed the rhythm of Cedar House. Tasha did not move in, not yet, and Victor did not ask her to. He knew better than to make a grand offer that could sound like charity dressed in a nice suit. Instead, he hired her part-time through his property office to help organize some of the household records and manage the kitchen's schedule. It was real work, paid fairly, with a contract, tax forms and no hidden strings. Tasha argued at first. "I do not need pity employment." "It is not pity employment," Victor said. "My house is a mess, my bills are a mess, and Marlene has been threatening to quit every other Tuesday." Marlene, standing in the doorway, said, "I have never threatened to quit. You have packed a suitcase twice." That was for dramatic effect. Tasha looked from one of them to the other, trying not to laugh. Victor continued, "I need help. You need work that does not require you to work 2 overnight shifts." It seems practical. Practical was something Tasha understood. She accepted, but only after making it clear she would not take $1 she had not earned. "Fine," Victor said. "You can start by explaining why my pantry has 12 cans of artichoke hearts and no peanut butter." Tasha opened the pantry, stared inside, then looked at him. "This is criminal behavior. I did not organize it. I can tell." Nia started coming by after school when Tasha worked. She did homework at the kitchen island, drew pictures at the dining room table, and treated the entire mansion like a very large puzzle that had been built without consulting her. She found a hidden service staircase, a dusty greenhouse behind the garage, and an old photo album in the library that Victor had forgotten existed. One afternoon, she found a picture of him standing beside Elaine at a summer fundraiser. He was younger, thinner, smiling in a way he had almost forgotten he could. Nia held it up. "Is that your wife?" "Was," Victor said. "Where is she now?" Victor looked at the photograph. "Somewhere else." "Did she not like you?" Victor looked at the photograph. "Somewhere else? Did she not like you?" Victor let out a breath. "I think she did, once." "Then why did she leave?" Tasha, who was at the counter sorting receipts, looked up sharply. "Nia, that is personal." "It is okay," Victor said. He looked at the child. "I was hurting, and I made her hurt too. Sometimes people leave because staying becomes too painful." Nia thought about it. "Did you say sorry?" "Not the way I should have." "Then maybe you should." Victor looked at Tasha. Tasha gave him a look that said, "Do not put this on me." Nia went back to the photo. "Grown-ups make everything hard. That," Victor said, "is probably the smartest thing anyone has ever said in this house." The physical changes came slowly. No lightning bolt, no overnight miracle, no dramatic moment where Victor jumped out of the chair and ran down the driveway. Real bodies did not work that way, and Dr. Mercer made sure he understood that. The tests showed increased activity in some of the pathways below his injury, limited but measurable. There were signs that his condition was not as fixed as everyone had assumed, though nobody could say why the change was happening now. Anne told him, "Your body may have had more potential than we believed, or you may be responding to renewed activity, reduced stress, better sleep, more consistent therapy. It could be several things." Victor said, "So you are telling me hope is not a treatment plan?" Anne gave him a dry look. "Hope is not a treatment plan, but it is a decent reason to follow one." She put him back into intensive rehabilitation. At first he hated it. His arms hurt, his shoulders burned, and his legs felt like they belonged to somebody else. But Nia showed up at every session she was allowed to attend, sitting in the corner with a coloring book, occasionally shouting things like, "Move your stubborn foot, Mr. Victor," which made the therapists laugh, and Victor pretend to be offended. Tasha worried that Nia was taking on too much, but Victor understood something Tasha did not yet see. Nia did not think she was responsible for healing him. She just believed people should not be left alone while they tried. That was different. One snowy Saturday, Victor managed to shift his weight from the wheelchair to the parallel bars with the help of 2 therapists. His knees trembled immediately. His arms shook. He barely made it 3 seconds before he had to sit again. But Nia clapped like he had won an Olympic medal. Tasha covered her mouth with both hands. Victor sat there breathing hard, sweat running down his forehead, feeling more alive than he had in years. "I stood," he said. "You stood," Tasha said softly. "Not much. Enough." Marlene, who had come along and pretended she was only there because someone needed to make sure Victor had lunch, wiped her eyes with a tissue and said, "Do not get too proud, Mr. Hale. You still look like a newborn deer." Victor looked at her. "I am recovering from a historic moment. I am allowed to be proud. You are allowed to be less dramatic." But there was warmth in her voice, the first real warmth she had shown around Tasha and Nia. It did not erase the tension. Marlene still watched closely. She still flinched when Nia wandered too close to Victor's office. She still made small comments about boundaries and appearances, but she was beginning to see what Victor saw. The house was changing. The lights were on more. The kitchen smelled like food. There were crayons in the drawer next to the silverware. And sometimes, late in the afternoon, Victor would sit by the window with Nia explaining the plot of a cartoon she was sure he needed to understand, while Tasha cooked something that made the whole first floor smell like garlic, onions, and comfort. It was not a perfect family. It was not even a family yet. But it was something, and that was exactly what made people like Celia nervous. Celia did not like changes she could not control. She was the president of the Larkspur Heritage Committee, chaired the annual Winter Gala, and had spent most of her adult life deciding which people were respectable enough to sit at which tables. She did not think of herself as cruel. That was the problem. People like Celia rarely do. She thought of herself as someone who maintained standards. When she saw Tasha's old Honda parked at Cedar House several days in a row, when she heard Mia laughing in the garden, when she learned Victor had hired Tasha officially, she decided the situation had gone beyond concern. She decided it required intervention. The first sign came in the mail. A thick cream envelope, hand-delivered with the Larkspur Neighborhood Association seal pressed into the flap. Victor opened it at breakfast. It was a formal notice informing him that Cedar House was subject to residential occupancy guidelines and that any long-term guests or non-family residents must be declared, approved, and, if necessary, reviewed for compliance. Tasha read it over his shoulder. "They are trying to say I cannot work here." Victor's face tightened. "They are trying to say they get to decide who belongs here." Tasha folded the letter and placed it on the table. "Then we should make this easy for them. I will stop coming." Victor looked up sharply. "No, Victor, I am not going to be the reason they come after you. They are not coming after me," he said. "They are coming after you. That is exactly why I cannot stay in the middle of it. Tasha, I spent 20 years letting people make decisions for me because I was too tired to fight. I will not do that again." She looked at him, caught between frustration and something softer. "You do not know what this could cost. Maybe I do not, but I know what it costs to do nothing." Tasha looked down at the letter. Her voice got quieter. "You have a choice. You can go back to being untouched by this. I do not." Victor rolled closer to the table. "Then let me be touched by it. For once in my life, let me stand where I should have stood a long time ago." Tasha did not answer. She turned away, pretending to check the stove, but Victor saw her wipe one eye with the back of her hand. That night, after Nia fell asleep on the sofa under a blanket with a cartoon still playing low on the television, Tasha and Victor sat in the dim kitchen. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming and the soft crackle of the heater. Tasha had stayed late because snow was coming again, and Victor had insisted she should not drive back to East Ridge in bad weather with Nia half asleep. He offered the guest room. Tasha refused at first. Then Nia murmured, "Please, Mama, the bed in our apartment squeaks when you turn over." Tasha looked at Victor. "You did that on purpose." Victor looked offended. "I have no control over furniture in East Ridge. You know what I mean." "Fine, maybe I did." Tasha sighed and sat back down. "You are impossible, I have been told." They sat in silence for a while. Then Tasha said, "You know why I do not trust easy kindness?" Victor waited. "Because people love helping when it makes them feel good. They want to be the hero in somebody else's story. But when it gets complicated, when the bills show up, when the neighbors talk, when the person they are helping has a bad day or says no or needs more than one meal and a smile, they disappear. Victor nodded slowly. I have been that person too. Tasha looked at him. The one who disappears? The one who mistakes a check for a relationship. I used to donate money and think that meant I had done enough. I did not ask who needed what. I did not ask why they needed it. I just wrote checks so I could feel like a decent man without having to get uncomfortable. Tasha studied him, and now I am uncomfortable all the time. That made her laugh, quietly but genuinely. Good, she said. It is about time. Victor smiled. Then, after a moment, he said, I am sorry about what people have said. Tasha looked toward the sleeping Nia. I can handle people talking about me. What I cannot handle is her hearing it. She's still little enough to think grown-ups are supposed to be fair. I do not want her to lose that too soon. Victor looked at Nia, her small hand curled around the edge of the blanket. I will do whatever I can to make sure she does not. Tasha turned back to him. You cannot promise that. No, he said, but I can promise I will not be one more person who lets her down. For the first time, Tasha did not look away. The next Monday, Victor's mother came to Cedar House without calling. June Hale was 78, elegant in the way only women who had spent their whole lives being watched could be elegant. With silver hair swept neatly back and a coat that probably cost more than Tasha's monthly rent. She had not visited in nearly 4 months. Victor saw her car pull into the drive from the front window and felt his stomach tighten. Tasha was in the kitchen making soup. Nia was sitting at the table coloring a picture of a giant sunflower with a man in a wheelchair next to it. Marlene announced June in the tone people use before a tornado warning. Your mother is here. Victor looked at Tasha. You do not have to stay. Tasha put down the spoon. I work here. You work here. You work here. That does not mean you have to stand through whatever this is. Tasha looked toward Nia. She is not seeing me run out the back door because somebody in a nice coat does not like where I am sitting. Victor felt a strange pride rise in him. All right, he said, then we do this together. June entered the living room with her gloves still on. She glanced at Nia first, then at Tasha, then at Victor. Her smile was thin and practiced. Victor, mother, I did not realize you were entertaining. Tasha stood. I am Tasha Carter. I work with Mr. Hale. June looked at her hand but did not take it. I see. Nia looked up from her drawing. Hi, I am Nia. June finally looked at the child. Hello. Victor felt the coldness in that one word. He had grown up hearing it. It was not loud, not dramatic, but it could make a room feel 10 degrees colder. June turned back to him. We need to talk. We are talking. Alone. No, Victor said. June's eyes narrowed. Victor, do not embarrass yourself. I am not the one embarrassed, he said. Tasha went still. Marlene stopped moving in the hallway. Nia looked between them, sensing that the grown-ups were about to do something serious. June stepped closer to Victor. I have heard some troubling things. I am sure you have. People are saying you have allowed strangers to move into your life at a time when you are medically vulnerable. Tasha's jaw tightened, but Victor lifted one hand slightly, asking her to let him answer. They have not moved in. Tasha works here. Nia visits. That is all. Is it? June's voice sharpened. Because I have heard you are spending every day with them, changing routines, ignoring your care team, letting a child convince you she can heal your body. Victor almost smiled at that. She has not convinced me of anything. She reminds me to try. June looked at Nia again. This is not appropriate. Nia dropped her crown. Tasha stood straighter. Mrs. Hale, I understand you do not know me. You do not know my daughter. But she has never done anything except be kind to your son. June turned toward her slowly. And you think kindness gives you the right to insert yourself into his home? Tasha's face changed. Not anger exactly, something older, something tired. I think hunger gave my daughter the right to knock on a door. Your son gave her food. After that, we both kept showing up because he asked us to. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him. June looked at Victor. Is this what you want? Victor did not hesitate. Yes. June's mouth tightened. You're being manipulated because you are lonely. Maybe, Victor said. Or maybe I was lonely because everyone around me kept treating me like a burden instead of a person. June flinched. That was the first crack in her composure. Victor felt bad immediately, but he did not take it back. He had spent years saying nothing because he did not want to hurt her. The silence had not helped either of them. Mother, you come here once every few months and ask why I am not better, why I am not more grateful, why I am not more grateful, why I am not trying harder. Then two people walk into this house and treat me like I am still worth talking to, and suddenly you are worried they are dangerous. June looked down. I am worried because I love you. Then love me enough to see what is right in front of you. The room went quiet. Nia picked up her crayon again, but did not color. Tasha looked at Victor, and for once there was no caution in her eyes, only understanding. June took a long breath. I do not know these people. You do not know me anymore either, Victor said. June stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Nia's drawing on the table. The sunflower was huge, taller than the house, with its yellow face turned toward a bright blue sky. Victor, still in his wheelchair, was standing beside it. June's expression softened for the smallest second. Then she put her gloves back on properly and said, I hope you know what you are doing. Victor looked at Tasha, then Nia, then at the sunlight coming through the window. No, he said, but for once I am doing something anyway. June left without another word. The front door closed behind her, and for several seconds nobody spoke. Then Nia looked at Victor and said, Your mama is grumpier than Marlene. Marlene, from the hallway, said, I heard that. Victor laughed so hard his chest hurt. Even Tasha laughed. Victor laughed so hard his chest hurt. Even Tasha laughed. It was the first time the tension broke all day, but later that night Victor found Marlene in the kitchen staring out the window. She had been quiet since June left. You agree with her, do not you? He asked. Marlene did not turn around. I think you are moving fast. That is not what I asked. Marlene sighed. I think you have been lonely for a long time, and I think lonely people sometimes mistake the first warm hand they feel for a rope. Victor rolled closer. Maybe it is a rope. Maybe I needed one. Marlene turned toward him. And what happens when they pull too hard? Victor looked at the house around him, then toward the guest room where Nia was asleep, and Tasha was probably lying awake, wondering whether staying had been a mistake. Then he said, I guess I will finally learn whether I can hold on. 2 days later, Dr. Mercer called with the results of Victor's latest scans. There had been improvement, real improvement, not enough to make promises, but enough that she wanted him to begin a more aggressive therapy plan. She also wanted to bring in a rehabilitation specialist from New York. Victor told Tasha first. She stood in the kitchen holding a dish towel, looking like she did not know whether to smile or cry. This is good, she said. This is really good. It might be. No, Victor, do not do that thing. What thing? The thing where you make a good thing sounds smaller because you are afraid it will disappoint you. Victor looked down. Tasha stepped closer. You do not have to act like nothing matters just because you have been hurt before. He looked up at her. You make that sound easy. It is not easy, she said. It is terrifying, but it is still better than living like you already lost. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen felt smaller than usual. Then Nia came running in from the hall holding a notebook. Mr. Victor, I made your walking chart. It had columns labeled try harder, do not be dramatic, and snacks. Victor stared at it. Do not be dramatic? That is a medical category now? Nia nodded seriously. Very important. Tasha laughed. Victor looked at the chart again, then at the two of them. Maybe hope was not a treatment plan, but he was starting to understand that it could be a reason to keep going when everything in you wanted to quit. The trouble was, hope was visible now. And in Larkspur, anything visible became something people wanted to own, judge, or destroy. The story leaked to the press a week later. At first it was just a local blog post, nothing major, a blurry photo of Victor outside the rehabilitation center, with Tasha beside him and Nia holding his hand. The headline read, Millionaire hears sudden recovery, raises questions about new companions. By that afternoon, the post had been shared hundreds of times. By evening, somebody had found an old photo of Tasha from a fundraiser where she had worked as catering staff years before. They posted it next to the new photo and wrote, From serving drinks to managing the estate, how convenient. Tasha saw it on her phone while she was waiting for Naya outside school. Her hands started shaking. Victor found out because she came into Cedar House late, face pale, jaw clenched, and put her keys down too carefully. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing." "Tasha," she handed him the phone. Victor read the post. Then he read the comments. Some were cruel, some were racists, some were just ugly in that casual way people get when they think a screen protects them from their own conscience. One comment said, "She found herself a goldmine." Another said, "Watch the kid too. They know exactly what they are doing." Victor felt heat rise behind his eyes. He had spent years being pitied. He had never known what it felt like to be hated because someone else assumed the worst about the people who cared for you. Tasha took the phone back. "I told you this would happen. You did. I am sorry. Stop saying sorry, then tell me what to do." Tasha looked at him. For once, she did not have an answer. That frightened her more than the comments. Nia came in from the back room carrying a school paper, smiling until she saw their faces. "What happened?" Tasha crouched beside her. "Nothing you need to worry about. That is what you say when something is bad." Nia looked at Victor. "Did I do something wrong?" Victor's heart broke a little. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong." "Then why is Mama sad?" Tasha looked away. Victor held out his hand to Nia. "Come here." She walked over. He took her small hand in his. "Some people are scared of things they do not understand," he said. "And when people are scared, sometimes they say ugly things. Like Marlene." Marlene called from the kitchen. "I am standing right here." Victor smiled faintly. "Sometimes like Marlene, but what they say does not change who you are." Nia looked down at their hands. "Are they mad because I am from East Ridge? Maybe some of them are. Are they mad because I am black?" Tasha closed her eyes. Victor felt the room go silent. Around them, he could have lied. Tasha closed her eyes. Victor felt the room go silent around them. He could have lied. He could have told her it was more complicated, that people were just worried, that it was not about her. But she deserved better than a lie. Sometimes, Victor said carefully, people see a person before they know them, and they decide they are afraid. That is wrong. It is not your fault. Nia looked at Tasha. "Is it your fault?" "No, baby." "Is it Mr. Victor's fault?" Victor looked at her. "Some of it is. Not because I caused it, but because I spent a long time not noticing it." Nia thought about that. Then she said, "So what do we do?" Victor looked out the window. Across the road, the lights were coming on in East Ridge. Beyond the gates, Larkspur was still whispering. He knew the easy answer. He could tell Tasha to leave. He could shut the doors, hire more staff, call a public relations team, issue some carefully worded statement about privacy, and disappear back into the safe loneliness he knew so well. But that would teach Nye the same lesson the town wanted her to learn, that cruel people get to decide who belongs where. "No," he said, "we do not run." Tasha looked at him sharply. "Victor, we do not run," he repeated. "Not from lies. Not from people who think they own the truth because they are louder." Tasha's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "You have no idea what you're inviting into your life." Victor nodded. "Probably not. But I know what I am not inviting back." "What is that?" "The man who sat in this house and watched the world go by because he was too afraid to care." That night, Victor called his attorney, David Rourke, a blunt former prosecutor who had worked with the Hale family for years and had never liked Victor enough to flatter him. David arrived the next morning carrying a leather briefcase and the expression of a man who knew the day was going to be annoying. He reviewed the association letter, the blog post, the photos, and the comments. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "Legally, they have nothing yet." Yet, David looked at Victor. "People like Celia do not start a fire unless they have something to burn. She will look for a way to make this about your mental capacity, your medical condition, your finances, anything that lets her pretend this is not just class prejudice and racism." Tasha stood near the window, arms crossed. "So what do we do?" David looked at her. "We document everything. Every threatening message, every post, every time someone contacts your employer or your landlord. Mr. Hale, you need to be careful. Your ex-wife still has contacts in town." Victor's face changed. "Dana?" David nodded. "She has been asking questions." Tasha looked at Victor. "You did not tell me about your ex-wife." "There is not much to tell." "There is always more to tell than that." Victor sighed. "Dana was not part of his life anymore." "Not really. But he knew her well enough to understand what she would see when she heard this story. She would not see Nia. She would not see Tasha. She would see a vulnerable former husband, a fortune, and a chance to regain control of a life she had walked away from years ago. David closed his briefcase. I'm not saying she is involved. I am saying do not be surprised if this becomes more than neighborhood gossip. He was right. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived at Cedar House. The envelope was white, clean, official, and so thin that Victor could have mistaken it for nothing. But the moment he saw the return address from Dana's law firm, he knew nothing had just walked into his house. Tasha stood beside him as he opened it. Nia was upstairs drawing. Marlene was in the pantry, quiet for once. Victor unfolded the letter slowly. It was a notice of intent to petition the court for a conservatorship review. Dana Hale was claiming that Victor's sudden behavioral changes, unusual medical beliefs, and new dependence on unrelated individuals raised serious concerns about whether he was being manipulated for financial gain. The letter used careful words, polished words, words designed to make cruelty sound responsible. But the meaning was simple. They were coming for his choices. They were coming for Tasha. They were coming for Naya, and this time they were not whispering from behind the gate. They were putting it in writing. Victor read the letter twice, then a third time, because sometimes your mind refuses to accept a threat until the words have had enough time to turn cold in your hands. Tasha did not say anything at first. She stood beside him in the kitchen, one hand resting on the back of a chair, the other pressed against her mouth as if she were holding in every fear she had spent years learning not to show in front of her daughter. The letter was polite in the way knives can be polite. It talked about concern, vulnerability, undue influence, financial protection, and the need to safeguard a disabled adult from possible exploitation. But every sentence pointed in the same direction. Dana Hale was not asking whether Victor was safe. She was asking whether someone else should be allowed to make decisions for him. Victor lowered the page. Well, he said quietly, that is one way to ruin breakfast. Tasha looked at him. This is not funny. I know. You are trying to make it funny. I know. You are trying to make it funny. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the room where Nia was probably lying on the floor with crayons scattered around her like confetti. I have spent 20 years being told what I cannot do. I guess I should not be surprised somebody finally decided I cannot choose who I care about either. Tasha picked up the letter. Her eyes moved over the lines again, slower this time. They are going to say I am using you. They already are. They are going to say I brought Nia here because of your money. Victor nodded. They will say that too. She set the letter down with more force than necessary. Then maybe I should leave before they make this worse. Victor looked at her sharply. No. Victor, listen to me. If I leave now, they still talk. If I stay, they can drag Nia into this. You think I am going to let that happen? I think you do not get to decide everything by yourself just because you own the house. That hit harder than she meant it to, and they both knew it. Victor looked down at his hands. For years he had used money to end conversations, fix problems, control outcomes. He had paid for silence, distance, convenience, and sometimes forgiveness he never earned. He did not want to make that mistake with Tasha, so he took a breath and said, You are right. Tasha blinked. I am? You are. You and Nia get to decide what risk you are willing to take. I cannot make that choice for you. But I need you to know one thing before you decide. What? If you leave because you are afraid, I will understand. If you leave because people like Dana and Celia made you feel like you do not belong here, I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I did not fight harder. Tasha looked at him for a long moment. There was no romance in that silence, not yet. There was something heavier than that. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. She sat down across from him and rubbed her forehead. Tell me about Dana. Victor leaned back in his chair. There was a time, he said, when Dana and I were good together. We were young, ambitious, and dumb enough to think those were the same thing as happy. She loved the version of me who could walk into a room and make everybody look up. Then I got hurt, and I became angry at everything. I made our house feel like a hospital room where nobody was allowed to breathe. Tasha watched him carefully. So she left, and you hated her for it. I hated her because I did not know what else to do with the pain. He paused. Then, after a moment, he added, "But she did not leave because she was evil. She left because I became impossible to live with." Tasha nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now she is angry because I am not impossible anymore. Or maybe she is scared that I am changing in a way she cannot control. That does not make what she is doing right. No, it does not. But I need to understand it if we are going to beat it." Tasha folded her hands on the table. "Then we do not fight her by acting scared. We fight her with the truth." Victor looked at her. "You are sure?" "No," Tasha said. "I'm not sure of anything. But I am tired of spending my whole life trying to make other people comfortable with me existing." The next morning, David Rourke arrived at Cedar House before 9 with 2 assistants, 3 thick folders, and a face that suggested he had already skipped his usual patients for the day. He spread papers across Victor's dining room table, while Marlene brought coffee to everyone and complained that the whole thing was making her house look like a law office. "Your house is a law office right now," David said without looking up. "That is rude," Marlene replied. "It is also accurate." Tasha sat beside Victor, stiff in a chair that suddenly seemed too formal. Nia was upstairs with a tutor Victor had hired months ago to help after school, though nobody had told her there was a legal crisis happening downstairs. David pointed to Dana's petition. "She is asking the court to appoint an independent conservator while they investigate whether Mr. Hale is capable of managing his finances and whether he is being manipulated by people in his household." Victor leaned forward. "I manage my own money. I sign my own contracts. I have a board of advisors who have been trying to annoy me for decades. Why would a judge even listen to this? Because Dana is not claiming you are incapable all the time. She is claiming your recent behavior is evidence of decline. Hiring Tasha, allowing Nia into the home, changing your medical routine, spending more money on therapy, refusing to listen to old staff. She will paint it as a pattern." Victor let out a humorless breath. So being less miserable is now a legal problem. David looked at him. In the wrong hands, anything can become a legal problem. Tasha's voice tightened. "What do they want from me?" David looked at her carefully. "They want you to panic. They want you to look defensive. They want you to say something angry on camera, take money without paperwork, make one mistake, miss one detail. Give them anything they can twist into proof." Tasha crossed her arms. "I have not done anything wrong. I know that. But the court does not only hear facts, it hears stories. And Dana is trying to tell a story where you are a desperate woman who saw a rich, disabled man and moved in for the money." Victor's hands clenched. "She did not move in for the money." Victor's hands clenched. "She did not move in." David nodded. "Then we prove that. We show the employment contract, the payment records, the timesheets, the bank deposits, the camera footage, the medical records, everything. We show that Nia was never left alone without Tasha's permission. We show that Victor made every financial decision independently, and we show that this petition did not begin because anyone was worried about Victor. It began because certain people did not like who he chose to trust." Marlene stood near the coffee tray, unusually quiet. Victor noticed my coffee tray, unusually quiet. Victor noticed. "You have something to say?" Marlene shook her head. "No." "That means yes," David said. Marlene gave him a hard look. "I have been thinking." "That is always dangerous," Victor said. "Do not start." Marlene looked at Tasha, then at Victor. "I may have said things I should not have said." Tasha's eyes narrowed. "What things?" Marlene swallowed. "Not to Dana directly. Not at first. But I spoke to Celia a few weeks ago. She asked if he was staying here, if Mr. Hale was making strange decisions, if the girl was spending a lot of time around him. And I told her I thought things were moving too fast." Victor stared at her. "You talked to Celia about us." Marlene's face tightened. "I thought I was protecting you." "From what?" Victor asked, his voice low. "From being taken advantage of." Tasha stood up slowly. "You did not know me. You barely spoke to me. And you went outside this house telling people I might be using him?" Marlene looked ashamed. I know I was wrong. I was scared." Tasha laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Everybody keeps saying that. Scared. Concern. Quantified. Careful. Do you know what it sounds like when people say those things about a black woman trying to make a life for her child? It sounds like they are getting ready to take something from her." Marlene looked down. "I know that now." "No," Tasha said. You know it because it happened in your house, not because you ever bothered to think about what it felt like before. The words stayed in the room. Victor watched Marlene absorb them. She had always been practical, loyal, sharp-tongued, and certain that she understood how the world worked. But for the first time, she looked older than he had ever seen her. Not weak, just tired of being wrong. "I cannot undo it," she said quietly, "but I can tell the truth about what I told Celia." David looked at her. Did Celia say why she was asking? Marlene hesitated. She said Dana had been in touch with her. Victor felt his stomach drop. Dana and Celia. Of course, one wanted control, the other wanted status. They had found each other at exactly the right moment. David made a note. That matters. It may not destroy their case on its own, but it gives us motive, and motive matters. The petition was filed 2 days later. That same afternoon, a reporter parked outside the gate at Cedar House. By evening, there were 3. By morning, there were 6. Camera crews stood along the road pretending not to be aggressive while they filmed every car that came and went. A local station ran a segment showing old footage of Victor from before his accident beside newer photos of Tasha helping him into a therapy van. The anchor spoke in a careful, sympathetic tone, the kind that made everything feel worse. Questions are being raised about whether business heir Victor Hale may be vulnerable to emotional influence from individuals who recently entered his life. The screen showed Tasha's face, blurry and caught mid-step. Then Nias. Victor saw it in the living room and nearly threw the remote through the television. Tasha grabbed his wrist before he could. "Do not. They want that." "I do not care what they want. I care what Nia sees when she comes downstairs." Victor looked toward the hallway. The house felt different now. It was not sad anymore. It was under siege. Nia came in 10 minutes later wearing pajamas with little stars on them, holding a bowl of cereal. She looked at the dark television screen, then at the adults. "Why are there people outside?" Nobody answered fast enough. Nia's face changed. She knew. Kids always knew. "Is it because of me?" Victor rolled toward her. "No, sweetheart. It is because some grown-ups are being foolish. They keep looking at our house. They are interested in the story." "What story?" Tasha sat beside her daughter. "The stories that some people do not understand our family." Nia looked at Victor. "Are we a family?" Victor froze. Tasha did too. The question was so simple, so innocent, and somehow it hit every person in the room at once. Marlene turned away. David looked down at his papers. Victor looked at Tasha, asking without words whether he was allowed to answer. Tasha put one hand on Nia's shoulder. "We are people who care about each other," she said, "and we are figuring out what that means." Nia considered that. Then she nodded. "Okay, but if we are not family yet, can I still tell them to go away?" Victor smiled despite everything. "You can tell them in your heart. Let David handle the legal version." The legal version came faster than anyone expected. Dana's attorneys filed for an emergency hearing, claiming Victor's health decisions had become irrational and that his recent therapy progress was being exaggerated by Tasha and Nia to gain public sympathy and financial access. They claimed Victor had changed his will, changed his household staff, and become isolated from people who had known him longest. That last part bothered Victor more than the rest because it had just enough truth in it to be dangerous. He had changed. He had pushed people away. He had stopped talking to his mother. He had shut out old friends. Dana was taking every wound he had caused in his past and using it as proof that he could not control his own future. The hearing was set for Friday morning. On Thursday night, Tasha packed a suitcase. Victor found her in the guest room, folding Nia's clothes into a small duffel bag, one tiny shirt at a time. He sat in the doorway, silent for a moment. "You are leaving." Tasha did not turn around. "I am taking Nia to my sister's in New Haven until this is over. That is 4 hours away. It is far enough from reporters, far enough from people yelling things at the gate, far enough from strangers taking pictures of my child." Victor looked at the bed. A stuffed rabbit sat near the pillow. Nia had named it Lieutenant Buttons because one eye had fallen off and she thought that made him look brave. "I understand," he said. Tasha stopped folding. "Do you?" "Yes, but I hate it." "Me too." She finally turned around. Her face was wet, though she had clearly been trying not to cry. "I keep thinking I can do this right. Work hard, keep my head down, raise my daughter well, do not give people a reason to talk. But it never matters. Somebody always decides they know who you are before you open your mouth." Victor's voice softened. "Tasha, I do not want Nia to grow up thinking she is the reason your life got harder. She is not, I know that. But she will not understand that when she sees cameras outside and hears her name on television. Victor wheeled closer. You are right to protect her. I would never ask you not to. But do not leave because you think you are alone in this. You are not. Tasha looked at him. What if you lose? Then I lose. What if Dana gets control of your money? Then I fight her. What if she convinces the judge I used you? Victor's eyes hardened. Then she has convinced the wrong judge. Tasha laughed through tears. You make it sound simple. No, I make it sound worth doing. The next morning, Tasha did not leave. She put the suitcase back in the closet, dressed Nia in her best blue cardigan, and drove with Victor and David to the courthouse. The building was old, grey, and too cold inside, with stone steps worn smooth by 100 years of people arriving scared and leaving changed. Reporters crowded the entrance. Cameras flashed the moment Victor's van pulled up. Someone shouted, "Mr. Hale, are you being manipulated?" Another voice called, "Miss Carter, did you move into his home for financial reasons?" Tasha held Nia's hand tighter. Victor's security guard moved ahead of them, but Nia still heard enough. She looked up at her mother. What does manipulated mean? Tasha crouched beside her. It means when somebody tries to make you do something you do not want to do. Did I do that to Mr. Victor? No, baby, you did not. Then why are they saying it? Because some people hear a story they do not understand, and instead of asking questions, they make up answers. Nia looked toward the cameras. They should ask better questions. Tasha swallowed hard. Yes, she said, they should. Inside the courtroom, Dana was already there. Victor had not seen her in nearly 6 years. She looked exactly the same at first glance. Perfectly tailored coat, dark hair swept back, face composed enough to make strangers think she had never lost control of anything in her life. But when she looked at him, Victor saw the small tremor in her jaw. She was nervous. That surprised him. Dana had always been fearless when she believed she was right, or when she believed she could make everybody else think she was right. She approached before the hearing began. "Victor," she said quietly. "Dana, I did not want it to come to this." He gave a short laugh. "You filed an emergency petition to take away my ability to make decisions. I am not sure what you thought it would come to." She looked past him at Tasha. "I am trying to protect you." "From her?" Dana's mouth tightened. "From anyone who sees a vulnerable man with money and thinks they can build a life around him." Tasha took one step forward, but Victor lifted his hand. "No," he said. "Let her speak." Dana looked back at him. "You have changed, Victor." "Yes. You are letting a child tell you she can heal your body." "I am letting a child remind me that I have a body worth trying for. That is not the same thing. You hired a woman you barely knew, let her and her daughter into your home, changed your entire routine, started talking about family. You have been lonely, and lonely people make reckless choices." Victor watched her. There it was, the part of Dana that still knew him, the part that knew exactly where to press. He could have exploded. He could have told her she had no right to talk about his loneliness after walking away, but that would have been the old Victor. The man who made every wound into a weapon. So he said, "Maybe I was lonely, but loneliness does not make me incapable. It makes me human." Dana's eyes flashed. "You do not know what they want from you." Victor looked at Tasha. "Then I will ask them, like an adult." Dana looked at him for another second, then turned away. The hearing began with a judge named Miriam Cole, a woman in her early 60s with silver glasses, a calm voice, and the kind of face that made people stop trying to perform for the room. She had seen every type of family conflict imaginable, every kind of manipulation, every kind of person claiming concern while holding a knife behind their back. Victor could tell within 5 minutes that she was not impressed by money, cameras, or drama. That gave him hope. Dana's attorney went first. He was smooth, well-prepared, and careful not to say anything openly cruel. He spoke about Victor's medical history, his isolation, his sudden changes in behavior, and the risk of emotional coercion. He showed photos of Tasha arriving at Cedar House, Nia sitting with Victor in the garden, Victor at rehabilitation therapy with Tasha holding a water bottle near him. He made ordinary moments look suspicious by giving them the right soundtrack. He called it a pattern of dependency. He called it a fragile man becoming attached to people who might benefit from his wealth. Then he brought up Victor's physical recovery. Mr. Hale has recently claimed unusual sensations and improvement in function after interactions with a child who has encouraged him to believe in a miracle. Does that not raise concern about compromised judgment? David stood immediately. Objection. Judge Cole looked at Dana's attorney. Counsel, belief in hope is not evidence of incapacity. The attorney nodded. Of course, Your Honor. But we are asking whether Mr. Hale's vulnerability is being exploited through emotional suggestion. Victor sat quietly, but his hands gripped the arms of his chair. Tasha noticed. She placed her hand lightly over one of his. He looked at her, then back at the court. Dana's lawyer called Celia Wainwright to the stand. Celia walked up in a pale grey suit with her chin lifted, looking like she had been waiting her whole life to become the concerned witness in someone else's tragedy. She testified that Victor had seemed withdrawn for years, that he had become suddenly different after Tasha and Naya entered his life, that she had seen Tasha's car at the house frequently, and that she feared Victor was being isolated. David stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Cater. Wainwright, he said, how often did you visit Mr. Hale inside Cedar House before Miss Carter began working there? Celia blinked. I did not have a reason to visit inside. So you did not regularly see his routines? No. You did not manage his medical care? No. You did not manage his medical care? No. You did not handle his finances? No. You did not observe any transaction between Miss Carter and Mr. Hale that was inappropriate? Not personally. But you were concerned? Yes. Because Miss Carter came from Eastridge? Celia's eyes narrowed. Because she was a stranger? David nodded. Is Eastridge a neighborhood you have ever lived in? No. Have you ever visited Miss Carter's apartment? No. Have you spoken with her employer? No. Have you spoken with her child's school? No. Have you spoken with Miss Carter for more than 5 minutes at any point before this case? Celia hesitated. No. David paused. Then you were not concerned because you knew her. You were concerned because you did not. Celia straightened. I was concerned because I know what happens when vulnerable people are targeted. David leaned slightly closer. Mrs. Wainwright, is it true that you contacted Dana Hale before filing the Neighborhood Association notice against Mr. Hale? Dana's attorney objected. Judge Cole allowed the question. Celia's face went pale. We spoke. About what? About the situation. Which situation? The fact that there were people in Victor's home who did not belong there. The courtroom went still. David did not raise his voice. He did not need to. What did you mean by did not belong there, Mrs. Wainwright? Celia looked around the room. Her confidence had cracked. I meant they were not family. David nodded. And how does someone become family? Celia did not answer. David looked toward Victor, then back to Celia. Is that for you to decide? Celia's mouth opened, then closed. No further questions, David said. The next witness was Marlene. Victor had not known whether she would be able to do it. She had spent 2 days rehearsing with David, then 2 nights barely sleeping. When she walked to the stand, her hands shook. She looked older than ever, but there was something steady in her eyes now. She testified that she had initially doubted Tasha and Nia. She admitted she had spoken to Celia. She admitted she had let fear and prejudice guide her. Dana's attorney tried to use that against Tasha. Even the house manager was concerned, he said. Marlene looked directly at him. I was concerned because I did not know them. Then I got to know them. That is the difference. He asked, did you not tell Mrs. Wainwright that Miss Carter might be using Mr. Hale? I did, and I was wrong. Were you concerned that Mr. Hale's behavior had changed? Yes. Then why are you now supporting Miss Hale's behavior had changed? Yes. Then why are you now supporting Miss Carter? Marlene's voice grew stronger. Because I watched Mr. Hale change from a man who barely spoke to anybody into a man who laughed again. I watched him go to therapy. I watched him listen. I watched Miss Carter work every day and turn down money she did not earn. I watched that child worry more about whether he ate dinner than whether he owned a big house. And I realized I had been judging people before I gave them the chance to show me who they were. Dana's attorney looked irritated. So you are saying you were wrong? Marlene nodded. I am saying I was wrong in a way that hurt people. And I am saying that calling it concern did not make it any less wrong. It was one of those moments that did not look dramatic from the outside. Nobody shouted, nobody burst into tears, But Victor saw Tasha look at Marlene, really look at her, and something in Tasha's face eased. Not forgiveness all at once, nothing that easy, but maybe the first space where forgiveness could someday sit. Then Dana took the stand. She was composed again by then, calm and polished, speaking about the Victor she had known before the accident. She said he'd been driven, brilliant, proud. She talked about how the injury devastated him. She described watching him push away friends, family, and eventually her. She sounded sad. That was what made it hard. Some of what she said was true. She said she worried that his loneliness made him easy to influence. She said she had received messages from people in town who believed Tasha was taking advantage of him. Shia said she feared he would sign away money or property because he was desperate to keep people near him. David stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Hale, did Mr. Hale ever sign over money or property to Miss Carter? No. Did he add her to any accounts? No. Did he add her to any accounts? No. Did he alter his will in her favor? Not that I know of. Did you personally see Miss Carter pressure him to give her money? No. Did you personally see Nia Carter manipulate him? Dana's mouth tightened. She is a child, so no. Dana looked toward Victor. But children can influence adults emotionally. David paused. Can former spouses influence adults emotionally? Dana's eyes sharpened. What does that mean? You have been in contact with Mr. Hale's mother, have you not? Yes. You have been in contact with Celia Wainwright? Yes. You have been in contact with Celia Wainwright? Yes. You have been in contact with his former board members? Dana hesitated. Some of them. You have asked questions about his financial decisions? Yes. You have asked whether he has changed staff? Yes. You have asked whether his medical care is being supervised? Yes. David took a step closer. Mrs. Medical Care is being supervised? Yes. David took a step closer. Hale, are you concerned about Victor Hale's well-being, or are you upset that he is building a life you no longer control? Dana's face changed. For the first time, the polished expression slipped. That is unfair. Is it? David asked. You left him 6 years ago. You have not visited him regularly. You have not attended a single therapy appointment. You did not call when he began to show signs of recovery, but the moment you heard a woman from Eastridge had become part of his life, you filed a petition questioning his competence. Dana looked at Victor. I was trying to protect him. David's voice softened, but only a little. From what, Mrs. Hale? From being loved by the wrong people? The courtroom went silent. Dana looked down. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I know what he is like when he is afraid. He will cling to anyone who makes him feel better. Victor watched her. She was not entirely lying. That was the difficult part. Dana had known him at his worst. She had seen him angry, cruel, desperate, impossible. She had watched him turn love into a demand. She had left because she could not survive inside that version of him. But what she could not understand was that people were allowed to change. David asked, and if he has changed? Dana did not answer. If he has changed, David repeated, does that mean you still get to decide who he becomes? Dana's eyes filled. No further questions, David said. The judge called a brief recess. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed the hallway. David got Victor, Tasha, and Nia into a side room before anyone could reach them. Nia had been quiet through most of the hearing, sitting beside Tasha with her feet swinging above the floor. Now she looked at Victor. Are you in trouble? Victor shook his head. Not if I can help it. Did Dana lie? Victor thought about that. Some of it, he said. Some of it was her being scared. But she hurt us anyway. Can somebody hurt you even if they are scared? Yes, sweetheart. People do that more than they should. Nia looked down at her hands. Then maybe scared people should get help before they hurt somebody. Tasha looked at her daughter and closed her eyes for a second. Victor smiled softly. That is a pretty good rule. When the hearing resumed, Dana's attorney made one last move. He asked the judge to hear from Nia. Tasha stood immediately. No, David objected. The courtroom filled with tension. Judge Cole looked at Nia, then at Tasha. Ms. Merkel, Carter, I will not require your daughter to testify unless there is no other way to determine the facts. Tasha held Nia close. But Nia looked at Victor. Then she looked at her mother. Mama, can I say something? Tasha shook her head. You do not have to. I'm Mother, can I say something? Tasha shook her head. You do not have to, I know. But I want to. Tasha's face broke a little at that. She crouched beside her daughter. You do not have to be brave for us. Nia touched her mother's cheek. I am not being brave. I am just telling the truth. Judge Cole allowed it, but only after asking Nia simple questions and making sure she understood she could stop at any time. Nia walked to the small chair near the witness stand. Her feet did not reach the floor. The courtroom that had spent all morning talking about her suddenly had to look at her. Not as a headline, not as a symbol, not as a suspicious little figure in blurry photographs, just a child. Dana's attorney approached carefully. Nia, do you know why you are here today? Nia nodded. Because people think my mama and me are taking stuff from Mr. Victor. Have you ever asked Mr. Victor? Have you ever asked Mr. Hale for money? No. Has your mother asked him for money? No. Has anyone told you that if you make him happy, he will give you things? Nia looked confused. No, I make him happy because he was sad. The lawyer nodded slowly. And did you tell him you could help him walk? Yes. Why? Because he said doctors told him he could not. And you believed you could help him? Nia nodded. I still do. The lawyer looked toward the judge, then back at her. How do you help him? Nia thought for a second. I tell him to try. I make him do his exercises. I make him laugh sometimes. He gets grouchy when he does exercises. Victor gave a small, embarrassed smile. A few people in the courtroom laughed quietly. Nia continued, and I give him flowers. Why flowers? Because flowers do not care if you are rich or poor. They grow where they can. That landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. The lawyer tried one more time. Nia, do you love Mr. Hale? Yes. Why? Because he listens to me, and because he gave me chicken when I was hungry, and because he is trying to be better. The attorney paused. Do you think Mr. Hale loves you? Nia looked over at Victor. He used to be lonely, she said. Then she looked back at the lawyer. I think he is learning. There was nothing left to ask after that. Judge Cole did not make a ruling immediately. She said she wanted to review the medical records, financial documents, testimony, and evidence of communication between Dana, Celia, and other parties. The hearing was continued for 1 week. For Victor, that week felt longer than the 20 years he had spent in a wheelchair. The media got worse before it got better. Some outlets painted Nia as a heartwarming child who had inspired a lonely millionaire. Others treated the entire story like a scam. People online argued about whether Tasha should be trusted, whether Victor was being manipulated, whether a child should be involved at all, whether Dana had a right to be concerned, whether race had anything to do with it. That last question made Tasha furious. Race has everything to do with it, she said one night, reading comments at the kitchen table. If I were a white woman from Larkspur with a college friend in a wheelchair, they would call me a caregiver, but because I am who I am and I come from where I come from, suddenly I am a threat. Victor sat across from her, exhausted from therapy. You are right. Tasha looked up. I know I am right. I just hate that I have to keep explaining it. Victor reached for her hand. Then, do not explain it to people who do not want to understand. We will show them. Tasha looked at his hand, then placed hers in it. The first time they held hands, it was not romantic. It was not even gentle. It was survival. But sometimes survival was where love started. Meanwhile, Dr. Ann Mercer brought in a rehabilitation specialist from New York. Dr. Ann Mercer brought in a rehabilitation specialist from New York, Jonah Bell, to review Victor's progress independently. Jonah was younger than Victor expected, sharp-eyed, blunt, and unimpressed by the attention surrounding the case. He spent 2 days reviewing scans, reflex tests, physical therapy notes, and medication history. Then he asked to see Victor walk between the parallel bars. Victor hated being watched. He hated being tested. He hated that every time his body failed, people looked at him like a machine that had disappointed them. But he did it. He pushed himself up. His legs trembled. His right knee buckled once. He gripped the bars, breathed through the pain, and took one uneven step. Then another. Jonah watched closely. When Victor finally sat, exhausted and sweating, Jonah looked at Anne. This is real, he said. Anne nodded. Una nodded. I know. Jonah looked at Victor. You are not cured. Let us be clear about that. Recovery is not a movie montage. You have a long road ahead, but you have measurable improvement in motor control, endurance, and voluntary movement. Whatever changed in your life, it helped you commit to rehab in a way you had not before. Victor looked toward the doorway where Tasha and Nia were waiting. Nia was holding a plastic cup with a sunflower sprout that had gotten taller. He smiled. You mean I finally started doing what my doctors told me? Jonah gave him a dry look. That is one interpretation. Nia stepped into the room. Is he going to walk all the way now? Jonah crouched in front of her. He is going to keep trying. That is better than all the way, Nia said. Jonah smiled. You might be right. The new medical report changed everything. David submitted it to Judge Cole along with therapy records, financial statements, employment documents, security footage, and a chain of emails between Celia and Dana that Marlene had helped uncover. The emails were not dramatic. They did not say, "Let us ruin Tasha Carter." People like Dana and Celia were smarter than that, but they revealed the shape of the plan. Dana wrote that Victor's emotional state had become unstable. Celia replied that Tasha had positioned herself perfectly. Dana asked whether anyone in the neighborhood had seen her access private rooms. Celia said she would ask around. In another email, Celia wrote, "People like her know how to appear grateful." Dana replied, "Then we need to show the court what she really wants." David read those lines aloud in the judge's chambers before the final hearing. Tasha sat there with her hands clenched in her lap, not because she was surprised, but because seeing the words in writing made it impossible to pretend she had imagined the whole thing. Victor looked at her. "You okay?" "No," she said, "but I am done being ashamed of something I did not do." The final hearing took place on a Monday morning in early March. Snow had started melting along the sidewalks, leaving gray slush at the curb and little strips of wet grass showing through. Spring was not here yet, but it was close enough that people could feel it. The courthouse was packed again. More reporters, more cameras, more strangers who wanted to witness a story they had spent weeks misunderstanding. Dana arrived alone this time. Celia arrived with a lawyer and an expression that had lost some of its polish. June Hale came too. She sat in the back row beside Marlene, hands folded tight in her lap. Victor had not spoken much to his mother since her visit at Cedar House, but 2 days before the hearing, she had called him. She had said, "I have been thinking about what you told me." Victor had waited. Then she said, "I am sorry it took me so long to hear it." He did not forgive her right away. Not fully, but he told her she could come. That was enough for now. Judge Cole began by addressing the medical evidence. Dr. Mercer testified that Victor's recovery was medically real, though incomplete. She explained that he had shown improved neural activity and voluntary control, that there was no evidence of medication tampering or fraud, and that his progress aligned with intensive therapy, better sleep, renewed engagement, and emotional support. Dana's attorney asked, "Doctor, are you saying a 7-year-old child healed Mr. Hale?" Anne looked at him over her glasses. "I am saying human beings do better when they have reasons to participate in their own lives. Love is not a replacement for medical care, but it is not irrelevant either." The courtroom went quiet. David then called Victor to the stand. He had testified before in business disputes, in board meetings, in negotiations where men twice his age tried to scare him into giving up ground. But this was different. This was not about money. This was about whether he had the right to be the person he had become. David asked him simple questions. Did Tasha Carter ever ask you for money outside her employment? No. Did she ever pressure you to change your will? No. Did she ever pressure you to change your will? No. Did Nia Carter ever manipulate you? Victor smiled faintly. She has manipulated me into eating vegetables once or twice, but no. Did you hire Tasha because you felt obligated? No. I hired her because she was competent, organized, and because my pantry was a disaster. A few people laughed. David continued. Did you invite Tasha and Nia into your life because you were incapable of making decisions? No. Then why did you? Victor looked toward Tasha. He could see Nia beside her, holding the yellow flower she had brought from home. He took a breath, because they treated me like I was alive before I remembered how to be alive. He looked back at David. For years, people saw my chair before they saw me. Then I started doing the same thing to myself. I became the man in the chair, the man who lost things, the man everybody had to manage. Tasha and Nia did not fix me. They did not rescue me. They reminded me that I still had choices. They reminded me that I could care about someone else. They reminded me that being hurt did not give me permission to stop living. David paused. And do you believe you are capable of making your own decisions? Victor looked directly at Judge Cole. Yes, Your Honor, more than I have been in a very long time. Dana's attorney cross-examined him hard. Mr. Hale, are you in love with Miss Carter? Victor did not look away. Yes. Tasha's breath caught. The lawyer continued. And does that not prove emotional dependence? No. It proves I love someone. Does your love make you willing to give her money? I'm willing to support the work she does because I pay people fairly. But I will not buy her love, and she would not take it if I tried. Have you considered that her affection may be part of a plan? Victor's voice grew colder. I have considered that people who have never bothered to know her keep asking that question because it is easier than admitting they judged her wrong. The attorney pressed on. You have changed every major part of your life since she arrived. Victor nodded. Yes, because I wanted to, not because I was forced to. The attorney looked toward the judge. No further questions. Then Judge Cole asked Victor something nobody had prepared for. Mr. Gumpety, Hale, she said, if this court dismisses the petition, what do you intend to do next? Victor looked at Tasha. Then he looked at Naya. He thought about the house on the hill, the sad house, the quiet rooms, the years he had spent hiding inside his own pain. I intend to keep going to therapy, he said. I intend to keep learning how to walk. I intend to make Cedar House feel like a home instead of a monument to everything I lost. And I intend to stop letting fear decide who gets to stand beside me. Judge Cole nodded once. Then she looked at Dana. Mrs. Murray, Hale, before I rule, is there anything you wish to say? Dana stood slowly. For the first time since the case began, she did not look angry. She looked tired. I thought I was protecting him, she said. Victor watched her. The room watched her. Dana continued. I knew how broken he had been. I knew what pain could make him do. And when I heard he was changing, I did not trust it. Maybe because part of me did not believe he could. Maybe because I did not want to believe someone else could reach him when I could not. Her eyes moved to Tasha. I was wrong to assume the worst of you. Tasha did not move. Dana swallowed. I cannot undo what I did. But I can stop pretending it was only about concern. It was also about me. It was about old anger, old fear, and maybe some part of me that still wanted to matter in his life. Victor felt something inside him loosen, not because everything was fixed. It was not, but because the truth had finally been said out loud. Judge Cole looked at Dana for a moment, then began reading her ruling. She found no evidence that Victor had been financially manipulated, medically exploited, or coerced by Tasha Carter or Nia Carter. She found that Victor had maintained control over his finances, employment decisions, medical care, and personal relationships. She found that Dana's concerns, though not entirely invented, had been amplified by bias, assumptions, and third-party pressure from people who had little knowledge of the actual relationship between Victor, Tasha, and Nia. She dismissed the petition. She also ordered the review of the harassment complaints, the unauthorized photographs, and the neighborhood association actions directed at Cedar House. Then she looked at Victor, Tasha, and Nia. Mr. Hale, the court cannot tell you how to live your life. Mr. Hale, the court cannot tell you how to live your life. Carter, the court cannot erase the harm caused by public suspicion. But this court can say clearly that neither wealth, disability, race, class, nor public opinion give strangers the right to take away a person's dignity. The gavel came down once. It was not loud, but Victor felt it in his chest. Outside the courthouse, the air was cold and bright. The reporters rushed forward again, but this time David stood between them and the family. No comments today, he said. You will get the ruling. That is all. Nia looked up at Victor. Did we win? Victor looked at her. We did. Did we win? Victor looked at her. We did. Nia thought about it. Does that mean the mean people have to say sorry? Victor smiled. Some of them might. Some of them will not. That is not fair. No, he said. It is not. But sometimes winning means you get to keep going, even when people never admit they were wrong. Tasha looked at him, and sometimes it means you stop waiting for them to. They walked down the courthouse steps together. Victor was still using his chair outside because the uneven stone steps and long distances were too much for him. He hated it a little. He still had days where he hated it a little. He still had days where he hated it a lot, but for the first time, he did not feel ashamed of being seen in it. He had not failed because he needed the chair. He had survived. There was a difference. June waited near the bottom of the steps. She looked at Tasha first. Tasha had expected a speech, maybe an apology that sounded too polished, maybe something careful enough to avoid saying what had really happened. But June just stepped forward and said, "I was wrong about you." Tasha stood still. June's eyes filled. I saw what I expected to see. I did not see what was actually in front of me. I saw your background, your neighborhood, the color of your skin, and I made a story out of it before I let you speak. I am ashamed of that. Tasha's face softened, but not completely. June continued, "I do not expect you to forgive me today. I would not deserve it, but I want to earn the chance to know you and Naya, if you will let me." Tasha looked at Naya. Naya looked up at June. "Are you still grumpy?" June let out a surprised laugh. "Sometimes." Naya nodded. "Okay, but you have to be nicer when you are scared." June wiped her eyes. "I will try." That afternoon, Cedar House was full in a way Victor had never seen it. Marlene cooked too much food, which she denied doing. June stayed for dinner. David came by with a bottle of wine and said he was only staying 10 minutes, then stayed 3 hours. Naya ran through the halls with a sunflower cup, which had grown tall enough that it needed a bigger pot. Tasha stood in the kitchen beside Victor while everyone talked around them. The house no longer felt like a museum. It felt messy. It felt messy. It smelled like roasted chicken, baked bread, and lemon pie. There were shoes near the door, crayons under the table, folders on the counter, and laughter coming from rooms that had once held nothing but silence. Victor looked around and said, "I am beginning to understand why people have families." Tasha smiled. "Because someone is always leaving dishes in the sink?" "That too." He looked at her more seriously. "I meant because they make it harder to disappear." Tasha's smile faded into something softer. "Victor, you do not have to disappear anymore." He reached for her hand. He did not make a speech. He did not try to turn the moment into something bigger than it was. He just held her hand and said, "I love you." Tasha looked at him. "I know," she said. "That is a terrible answer." "It is an honest one." Then she squeezed his hand. "I love you too, but you are still impossible." Victor smiled. "I can live with that." A few weeks later, as the last patches of snow melted from the lawn, Victor asked Tasha to meet him in the greenhouse behind Cedar House. Nia had helped clean it out, though her version of cleaning involved making little signs for every plant and naming 3 of the pots after cartoon characters. The greenhouse smelled like wet soil and warm glass. Sunlight poured through the old panes. In the center stood the sunflower Naya had planted months earlier, taller now, its stem leaning toward the light. Tasha walked in and looked around. "You are hiding something." "I am terrible at hiding something." "You really are." Victor stood beside the parallel bars he had installed there for practice. He no longer needed both therapists nearby every time he stood. He still moved slowly, still carefully, still with effort, but he could stand. He reached down, gripped the bars, and pushed himself up. Tasha's eyes widened. "Victor, I am okay," he said. His leg shook, but he held steady. Then, with one hand on the bar and the other reaching into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small ring box. Tasha covered her mouth. "Victor, do not you dare fall down right now." He laughed. "That is very romantic. I am serious, I know." He laughed at her. "Tasha, I spent years thinking my life was over because I lost the ability to walk. But the truth is, I stopped living long before my accident. I stopped seeing people. I stopped letting people see me. Then you and Nia came into my life, and you did not ask me to be fixed before you cared about me. You asked me to try." He opened the box. "I do not know what every day will look like. I still have therapy. I still have pain. I still have pain. I still have bad moods, and you will probably have to tell me when I'm being dramatic. Nia already does that. She is very strict. But I know this. I want every hard day, every good day, every ridiculous day with you. Will you marry me?" Tasha was crying now, which made Victor nervous, because he'd never been good at reading tears. She stepped closer, placed one hand on his face, and said, "Yes, yes, but you are sitting down after this." He smiled. "Deal." Nia burst through the greenhouse door before either of them could say anything else. "I knew it," she yelled. "I told Mama he was acting weird." Tasha laughed through tears. "You were supposed to stay with June." "I did. But Grandma June said I could come see the flower." Victor looked at June, standing in the doorway, trying not to smile. "You set this up?" June lifted both hands. "I have been told I need to be nicer when I am scared." This felt like progress. The wedding took place in late summer in the garden behind Cedar House. It was not huge. Victor refused to make it into a society event, which shocked half of Larkspur and delighted the other half. There were no cameras inside the gate, no reporters, no people who had only come because they wanted a story. There were neighbors who had apologized, people from Eastridge who had helped Tasha when life was hard, staff from the rehabilitation center, Naya's teacher, Miss Delia from downstairs, David, Marlene, June, and a few old friends of Victor's who had finally admitted they had been absent when he needed them most. The garden was full of sunflowers. Naya insisted on that. She wore a yellow dress and carried a basket of petals. Victor walked down the aisle slowly, using a cane in one hand and June's arm for balance. Every step took effort. Every step was real. Tasha stood beneath an arch covered in simple white flowers and gold sunflowers, looking at him like he was not a miracle, not a billionaire, not a man in a wheelchair or a man learning to walk, but just Victor, the man she had chosen. When he reached her, he whispered, "I made it." Tasha smiled through tears. "You did." The ceremony was simple. No dramatic speeches, no promises about perfect futures, just two people promising to keep showing up, even when fear made it easier to leave. Nia stood between them when the officiant asked for the rings, holding them so carefully that everyone laughed when she said, "Do not drop these, they are probably expensive." Even Victor laughed, especially Victor. After the vows, June stepped forward and hugged Tasha. Marlene hugged Tasha too, awkward at first, then tighter. Celia did not attend. Nobody invited her. Dana did not attend either, but she sent a letter. Victor read it privately the night before the wedding. It was not a request to come back into his life. It was not an excuse. It was simply an apology. Dana wrote that she hoped he would keep choosing the life that made him kinder, and that she was sorry she had tried to stop him from becoming someone new. Victor folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. He was not ready to forgive everything. Maybe he never would be. But he did not need to carry the anger anymore. That was enough. Years later, people in Larkspur still told the story wrong sometimes. Some said a little girl had healed the millionaire with flowers. Some said Victor Hale had been saved by love. Some said Tasha Carter had walked into a mansion and changed everything. The truth was not as neat as any of that. Naya did not magically fix Victor's legs. Therapy, medicine, hard work, time, and a body that had not given up as completely as everyone thought all played their part. Tasha did not rescue him either. She challenged him. She made him accountable. She refused to let him use money as a substitute for trust. And Victor did not save Tasha and Nia. He opened a door, yes, but they had been surviving long before he ever noticed the road across from his own house. What changed all of them was smaller and harder to explain. A hungry child knocked. A lonely man answered. A mother refused to be treated like a suspect. A housekeeper admitted she had been wrong. A mother learned to listen. A former wife faced the damage she caused. And one man who had spent 20 years believing he had lost his life finally understood that a life is not measured by what your body can do or what your bank account can buy. It is measured by who you let close when you are afraid, and whether you have the courage to stand beside them when the whole world tells you to step back. So here is the question nobody in Larkspur could agree on after all of it was over. Was Dana truly trying to protect Victor, or was she trying to control a life she no longer belonged to? Was Celia just concerned about a vulnerable neighbor, or did she hide prejudice behind the word concern because it sounded more respectable? And was Victor right to trust Tasha and Naya so quickly? Or did he simply get lucky that the people who entered his life were exactly the people he needed? Tell us what you think in the comments, because the hardest part of this story was never whether Victor could walk again. It was whether people could learn to see one another before fear told them what to believe. Share this story with someone who still believes kindness can change your life, and subscribe for more stories about second chances, hard truths, and the kind of miracles that begin when someone decides not to look away.